If you decide to make a long and exciting journey from North America to South America or vice versa, hoping to drive a car all the way, then already at the planning stage you will understand that it is impossible to tell how it happened, and where is the longest highway in the world dangerous. Smugglers and Indian tribes. The concept of creating a road connecting South America, Northern originated as early as the 19th century. It was sounded to the fore by the American Conference. True, then it was about railroad tracks. However, the matter did not go further than conversations in 1923. The idea to build a Pan-American highway appeared, and 2 years later it was decided to implement it. As a result, a network of roads was born that entered the Guinness Book of Records as the longest highway on our planet. But you need to figure it out with its length, since in different sources the data differ. If we talk about the total length of the Pan-American Highway, with all its branches, then according to the most daring estimates, its length reaches 48,000 kilometers, which is the great circumference of the equator. But if we consider the distance along the shortest path from the north and south points of the highway, then you will have to drive a little more than 23,000 kilometers in the Guinness Book of Records, but another result is entered 24,140 kilometers, since the path is measured in a different way for the branch of the highway and it's the endpoint of the South American city of Brazil. But whatever figure is not taken into account. In any case, this is the longest highway in the world at the moment. In fact, the main part of the American highway originates in the edges, cold and harsh in Alaska, the starting point of a small village, where only about 2,000 people live. It was built next to the gas and oil fields of the same name. The official start of the highway is located near the US-Mexican border. As for the final section of the route, this is the southernmost city in the land of Ushuaia. It is incredible, but traveling along this road you can pass more than a dozen countries. Almost all climatic zones and various ecological regions, as well as visiting almost all South American capital. The highway does not only go through Belize to go Pebbles, but to get into a car in Alaska and get to Argentina only by road. You won't succeed, and there is a good reason for that. Perhaps the most amazing and interesting section of the Pan-American Highway. The village gap of this area of impenetrable jungle measures about 160 by 50 kilometers. It divides the longest track in the world into two sections, between which it is located 87 kilometers on the territory of the two countries of Panama and Colombia. It is not possible to drive through the village gap in an ordinary car, and it will not be easy on an SUV. Oddly enough, the easiest way is to walk. However, I can't even call such a walk an amusement one. After all, the rugged jungle awaits the conquerors of the village break. On average, the journey takes 10 to 15 days. It all depends on the route and the individual characteristics of the traveler. One way or another, without the experience of such transitions of special training and what kind of knowledge of the area, it is better not to meddle there. The idea of laying a road through the village gap has been expressed more than once, but its implementation remains a big question mark on an area covered with mudflows and swamps, in which the construction of roads is extremely difficult. But, despite this, back in 1970s, the United States sponsored the development of the project, but then environmentalists opposed. In their opinion, the construction of a motorway would cause irreparable harm to nature. In the early 1990s, they returned to the discussion of the issue. But again to no avail. This time they were categorically against it. He, too, worried about the possibility of environmental damage, since there are 2 national parks included in the UNESCO World Heritage List on the territory of the gap. Now there are other opponents of the idea of building the road. She does not like the local Indian tribes, who do not really want to be disturbed and worried about the safety of their original culture. Other possible problems associated with the construction of the road, an increase in drug traffic from Colombia. Now there are those who are not ready to cross the Darien Gap. On foot, ferries run here between Panama City and various Colombian ports, such as the Battle of Ventura and Cartagena. This is the only way to transfer cars and continue along the southern part of the Pan-American Highway, and it seems strange because the continents are connected by the Isthmus of Panama. It seems that nature itself overturned the bridge, but the village gap forces you to use water transport. The Mandarin Gap, a land, although not too friendly, but people live here. Representatives of the 2 Indian tribes Kuna and Chaco live on its territory. Both are very ancient traditions. For example, some women of the Czech still prefer to go topless from fancy tattoos on their backs, as their ancestors did to survive in the difficult conditions of the village gap. Chaco succeeded thanks to the knowledge of animals and plants passed down from generation to generation, as well as the Coon waterways. They also try to preserve the old way. In particular, they strictly forbid marriages with foreigners. This closeness has led to the fact that among the Kanab there is the largest percentage of albinos in the world whom they call moon children. It is interesting that matriarchy reigns among the Kanab. For example, a woman chooses her husband for herself, and after the marriage ceremony he goes to her family. Over the years, the village gap has invariably attracted the attention of adventure seekers unafraid of danger. At one time, many attempts were made to overcome it by car, but they all ended in failure. The situation has changed. In the second half of the 20th century, the preparation of the expedition began in 1957, and it was possible to finish it only in 1960, according to the goals of the project called the Darien Trans Expedition. Its participants had to travel to the Colombian capital, Bogotá, to attend the Pan American Highway Congress. The start of the expedition was scheduled for February. In order to storm the village gap in the dry season, two specially prepared off-road vehicles, Jeep CJ5 and a Land Rover Defender, were allocated for it. Since it was immediately clear that the cars would not pass the expedition without assistance, they were supplemented with 8 participants who were entrusted with the construction of the crossings and clearing paths in the midst of rich local vegetation. Crossing the village gap took 4 months and 20 days. During this time, the team faced a lot of difficulties. The members of the expedition had to conquer steep hills, cut their way through dense thickets with a machete, and cross numerous rivers and streams as ferries across a reservoir. They often used the trunks of palm trees, at the same time strong and flexible. In total, they erected 125 temporary bridges. Problems, and the climate added. After all, in the tropical jungle and in the dry season, life can hardly be called comfortable. In addition, do not forget about the local inhabitants of poisonous insects and their snakes. Fortunately, no one on the team was seriously injured. The journey ended successfully. But this has once again proved that only a few are destined to listen to the North America from South America. The inaccessibility of the village gap also made it attractive for illegal migrants trying to get to Panama for further immigration to more developed countries, in particular the United States. But it also attracted smugglers and Latin America's most famous rebel group. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia control most of the area. A significant proportion of migrants who risk their lives to bridge the rural gap of Cuban immigrants from Haiti come from Cameroon and Congo, as well as Sri Lanka, India, and Bangladesh. In the spring of 2021, the UNICEF Children's Fund shared sad statistics. He reported a sharp increase in the number of children among illegal immigrants passing through the village gap. If in 2017 there were only 2%, then in 2020 it became 25%, while hardly anyone would argue that the village gap in places that are for adults are not very pleasant. And as a minor, there is absolutely nothing to do there. In the 21st century, when there are not so many truly wild corners left on our planet, Darien has broken through. Continues to be one of them. Of course, if you wish, you can even find an excursion there, but with a guide. You will only pass through relatively civilized places and you will hardly meet with smugglers and other unpleasant individuals who are outside the law. And until there is an urgent economic need. As long as environmentalists will be ready to defend this region, as long as there are Indian tribes living there, the road through the village gap, it is unlikely to build. Perhaps it is for the best. That's all, friends. See you later.